I have an Anthony Bourdain devotional candle too.
Do you?
Josh sent it to me, actually.
St. Anthony Bourdain is in my kitchen. St. Mr. Rogers is in my living room.
I don't have Mr. Rogers, but all right. Well, welcome everyone. All right, so that's a little bit of learning. People can't see or hear us until we actually press record.
Probably better.
So that is good to know. It's also streaming live to YouTube, which I figured out how to do. So there we go. We're going to talk about the chunk in the middle, or not even the middle, 8 through 11. We're going to talk about it as a chunk tonight. But first, Josh,
right.
You have an offering for us.
I do. It's a little tongue-in-cheek. So let's see if you can get it.
With some people ain't no damn good. You can't trust them, you can't love them. No good deed goes unpunished, and I don't mind being the whipping boy. I had that pleasure. He's ain't. I never was a sinner. Tell me what can I do? Second best is what you get when you learn them rules. Sometimes respect no person. Lift must fall. Waiting outside to claim my crumbling wall. Look on the page, you read the news around me. And now some people don't wanna treat me the same when the wall come tumbling down the wall. Come crumbling, crumbling the wall. Come crumbling, tumbling down. Well, some people say I'm obnoxious and lazy. I'm uneducated. Opinion means nothing, but I know I'm a real good dancer on me low. See what I'm at? Everybody's got the problems. Ain't no news here. Same old trouble here. You feel my breath in my ear. You can let it, you can break it, but you better stand clear when the walls down when the walls come down the walls come tumbling, crumbling, tumbling down. Put my arms around you, feel my breath in your ear. You can bend, you can break it, but you better stand. Come tumbling, tumbling, tumbling down.
Bravo.
Is that from the what is it? Album? Pink. Josh, what album is that?
John Mellencamp. I don't know what the album is.
I think it's the same. I think it's I can't remember the name. Something or other. It's the same one that has pink houses on it. And like, I Fought the Authority, and you can't grow up in Ohio and not be obsessed with John Cougar Mellencamp because it's right next door.
John Mellon Cougar Camp.
Exactly.
Well, welcome everyone tonight. David, you were not here last week, and all we heard about was how much people missed you. And so, David, I want to begin tonight with any questions or thoughts you think are worth people reflecting on in this part of the seventh seal cycle here, in these chapters at the end of the first third of the book?
Yeah, again, like I know we've mentioned this a few times before, but just focus like seeing the use of like sound and silence, like the sonic imagery that goes on here, is really interesting to me, especially considering the biblical theme, right, of the silence of God as judgment and the speech of God as grace. Like that's that paying attention to where those things show up and how they show up is really interesting, I think, in these chapters. That's just one thing. Yeah, I mean, we get some really crazy images here, and this is not a question, more as a suggestion. But I don't think we should try and make sense of them in some way. Like I think part of the effect is how regularly you can come back to this text and it is still disconcerting. It is still a vision that you don't get. You can't see it. And I think that sort of sitting in that is a helpful reminder to us that we cannot predict the ways that God is going to show up.
That's a good. I was thinking about this, given that I preached from Revelation 13 on Sunday, and that's a good reminder that there are a few cases, right, David, where prophecy also functions as an allegory. So like the beasts that John sees in Revelation correspond to, so the beast that John sees corresponds to the four beasts that Daniel sees, and Daniel tells you straightforwardly that they're allegorical, and this one means this, and this one means this, and this one means this.
Right.
But you're right that by and large, the prophetic images in Revelation or other apocalyptic literature can't necessarily be made to mean one thing.
Yeah, they can, absolutely. And I think also they are, again, this goes back to this kind of dual function that we've mentioned a couple of times with apocalyptic literature, insofar as how what the language and images also reveal about our world, is that things really don't make sense on this side either. Like, and if anything, they make less sense. And so using this kind of as a foil, right, for thinking about the present state of the world, which is not to say, right, which is not to be mutually exclusive, like this, what John is talking about is the future state of the world. It's not. What John is talking about is the real state of the world. And so in an interesting way, I want those images to help us make less sense of this world.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like it's these should jolt you from being so used to what we see on a day-to-day basis.
So Todd, you've been working with these texts on Sundays. Talk a little bit about, as a reader going through, particularly, I'm thinking of like chapter 9, but talk a little bit about how a reader like you, what you do with kind of this kaleidoscopic and bizarre imagery that you encounter in these texts. Yeah, so in appearance, the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces. Their hair like women's hair. Their teeth like lions' teeth. That's from chapter 9.
Yeah. I think we said it from the beginning that one of the things that is helpful reading or being a reader of Revelation is to at least be familiar with or know how to trace some of those images where they show up in the Old Testament. And so that it doesn't come off like John is having a great acid trip on Patmos, but that you can read Ezekiel and Daniel and you can come away thinking, man, there's something in the water there in Israel, you know, and then you find out the way those get explicated, like David was talking about, and you're even pushing further back and you're seeing some semblance of kind of this odd combination of the troubles that Israel's been through. Some have been as they were, about to be set free from Egypt, and some were, consequential to their wanderings. So I think that one of the things that I've tried to do as we've worked through it at our church is that these are actually, I think, and I get what Dave was saying now a while ago. I think these are actually to actually expose our weak imaginations.
That part.
I think because at least in my kind of personal experience with Revelation for most all of my life, the intention was to explain every detail rather than see that you can't explain every detail, so that you ought to actually be more imaginative about what's taking place, that you can't nail down everything. And the reason I say that is because otherwise what we do is we make this purely predictive and speculative, and there is no real good way to say, well, let's see, that image, I can't really find that anywhere. What's it actually referring to? What are the references? And so, for example, you mentioned that these visions compare, the beast and 13 compare to Daniel, for instance, and you're like, okay, then what was going on there? And not that like is your now your decoder ring for Revelation, but it is now a way of saying, yeah, you thought that, and I don't want to venture too far afield, but you think that all governments are just in favor of human beings, when in reality none of them really are. The order of things is not really, doesn't really have your best interest in mind. But if you're trying to decipher each individual element of the vision, you're missing the template that's being overlaid every era and multiplied centuries to say these are the beasts that haunt you, and they're not really in your favor. They're really actually more so interested in their own well-being. Like, I mean, how many of you have your own false prophet to tell people to worship you, Jason? I mean, that's a that I think that's one of the things that you try to do, and I know that's not necessarily what maybe you all have to work with, but man, we're talking about people so captured by particular explanations that you just have to say, this has got to kind of blow up your mind a little bit. You kind of this would make a great CGI character, and you've never seen one like this, so what would you think it would, anyway. I mean, I think that's what you have to do, because remember, I think we have emphasized over and again, and I think David actually let out, we're hearing what John was seeing in hopes that we can see what John saw.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah. And so I had two thoughts listening to what you just said. So one is, John, like Ezekiel and Daniel before them, they're not seeing a world that is about to arrive. What they see the world as it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mistake that a lot of interpreters in American culture make, that,
Yes.
the COVID vaccine is this, and if we elect this person, this will happen. oh, they moved the embassy to Jerusalem, therefore, no, like these are images of these are imagistic ways of explaining how the world has always functioned under polities that are not God, not God's. And then the other thought I had too is that while these images, like David was saying, can't usually be made to mean one thing, they do correspond to things in the Old Testament, and therefore it's a way of saying that. So I've been thinking about this lately, about like a lot of like ecumenical and interfaith conversation is premised on an unspoken assumption that the true God is unidentifiable and unknowable, and we just have our enculturated ways of speaking about God. And what Revelation is doing by seeing these threads, of what prophets saw, like John is reminding us that no, actually, the true God is identifiable through a very particular history, and that he is participating in the present tense of that past history, of which we're a part. And then based on that past, we can kind of figure out how to act in the present and move towards the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kelly, tag in.
I have a song lyric. There's a Christian artist named J.J. Heller, and she sings a lyric that says, "Don't let your eyes get used to darkness. The light is coming soon." But when we talk about, like, we are so conditioned, and I'm a substitute teaching currently, and when I'm in the schools, I'm in public schools, but I'm like, this is not normal. It's not normal to have intruder drills in a public education. I don't want you thinking that this is normal, because it's your norm for your time, but that's not what's good and right for humans. I think that's, I have to be a little covert about it in a public school setting, which is fine. I love it when people tell me I can't pray in schools. I'm like, I pray all day. You can't pray like the hypocrites out on the street for attention, but I pray all day long for these people, for myself, for the students, for the staff. But that's what it makes me think of, is there is a deeper, truer reality. And then I kind of go back to Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun, right? And so empire is going to empire. And apparently Star Wars fans, I'm not one, I've never seen a Star Wars movie, but apparently that's like the overarching theme. And so for us to have, again, where we don't have to name, and I hear that all the time. I used to think that Star Wars fans were dorks, and now
It's true.
Everybody that's cooler than me in my life and way more intelligent than me loves Star Wars. So I'm humbled by that. But I just keep thinking of that song lyric again and again. Don't let your eyes get used to darkness. This isn't normal. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. There's a way for humans to flourish, and we are so far from that. Jason, your sermon from yesterday, just, like, how can we have profit? The first thing I did was Google what the Purdue CEO makes a year. Well, we can't possibly take care of these, we can't possibly pay a fair living wage for people. Why? Because somebody needs to make 92 million a year.
Yeah.
And that's just what I think about when we talk about Revelation. But I hear it. I had a prisoner's sister that I drove down to visit him while he was dying of cancer, a 4-hour drive, and she is the QAnon queen, man. She knew I'm blue blood. I'm what's called a blue blood because I've had the vaccine, and celebrities cut babies up and do things in their blood, and that's how it was nauseating. I was literally, I felt sick to my stomach by the time I got to the prison and dropped her off, and then I had a 4-hour trip facing me back, and it was just like, Lord, I don't know if I could do this, man. I might need to see how much an Uber is, because but I'm in the Midwest, and that's pretty prevalent here, even in my small town that I'm living in. I get in conversations with people, and it's like, oh, you really believe this, don't you? But so that's where my brain goes.
And that's a good, because I think that connects to what I was trying to say, Kelly, because, so like, I think it's a mistake to think that Revelation has some sort of otherworldly message, in the same way that, like the worship of Moloch in the Old Testament, these Canaanites who sacrificed their children to Moloch. How, like, we make a mistake. We live in a culture where we willingly watch children get gunned down in the name of an abstraction. And so, like, we make a very profound mistake to think that somehow the Old Testament is describing a reality that isn't real, while we live in that very same reality. And thinking about Revelation 8 through 11, one of the real moral theological questions raised in these chapters again and again is you because there's this language all over these chapters of Revelation about, like, these forces of death are allowed to make war upon the saints, upon the Lamb, upon the Mother. And we encounter these texts, right? And they raise these questions to us. But I don't know that we, like, stop to appreciate the fact that, like, well, no, like, we're actually, like, living that. Like they
Right.
like
Right.
they're making war upon us right now. So it's like we live in an economy that depends on cheap child labor. Like, that's like we're like, it's not, these are just prophetic ways of speaking about what's going on.
That's the most disheartening part about it, right? Because when you talk to a Christian in our country about Revelation, like, it's this fantasy thing that, and they're, oh, it's this president or it's that president. It's like, it's literally your neighbor that's suffering right now.
Mhm.
And it's the trailer park down the road where they're going to work before and it's our country rolling back rights that we've had that we're now giving away. Child labor in several states has come back. They're eradicating laws regarding child labor. That's terrifying to me. Like, education is so downplayed, and I get it. Both parents have to work, but it's mind-boggling to me how you miss what's actually happening to make up stories about. That's so disheartening. It's like, how are we ever going to make things better when people are making up stories about, Taylor Swift and Miley Cyrus? Like, can we talk about, like, actual things that are happening in the ways the church is supposed to be church right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what's really important about, like, Revelation 12 in particular, right? But even how Jesus speaks of Satan, that the only actual power, that Satan has no substance and therefore has no real power other than the power of deceit. And so, like, if you want to, like, see the forces of darkness at work in the world, it's not, these tangible things that people want to point to and spin conspiracy theories. It's the web of lies that so many people get caught up in.
And like C.S. Lewis says, right? Distraction, Wormwood talking about, like, just distract them. And Jason, I messaged you earlier this week about a woman that I was talking to, a Catholic woman locally, and, like, it about broke my heart, and I want to get tonight what it was about, but her priest doing exorcisms on people that are, like, they used to do that left-handed people. They used to do that. Can we stop this? Can we stop othering? Can we stop finding evil and just start loving each other? Because literally that's what we're called to do. I guess it's way easier to have exorcisms over others.
Well, yeah, I mean, and as soon as you start, like, that phrase that you used, Kelly, like, oh, you actually believe this stuff, like, the way that like, if we did put down our swords and start loving each other, people would be directing those questions our way. Oh, you actually believe this stuff? Oh, you actually believe that the deceiver has no authority of his home? You actually believe that the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, present. Like, I mean, that's it. It just, yeah. I mean, the accusation falls just as heavily on us.
And David, that touches on verse 9 in chapter 10. So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, take and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be as sweet as honey. And so, you're touching upon the message we are conveyed to relay and embody is one that will not be met with any
Joyous hands, proud acclamation.
or what discipleship is not something you can undertake with any standard of success known to us.
Yeah. Right.
No,
No, in fact, discipleship is the art of failure. Like, it's the Christian art of failure in some ways. Like, I don't know, it just made me think of that. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to think about that some more.
Josh,
Can you hear me?
I think you mentioned connection issues.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you, Josh.
I'm struggling with. You guys keep freezing on me. So you mentioned earlier that we're a story form community. Dave talking about how apocalyptic reveals what's going on now, but Jason was alluding to how that's shaped by Israel's story. And when you hear things like being practiced in the art of failure, when you hear about like take this, but it's going to fall on deaf ears, immediately comes to mind, right?
Yeah, right.
For us, and I'm going to send you out amongst the people, right? Who you're going to preach good news, but they're not going to want to hear it. Going to be able, and if are formed in that story, then that can inform our expectations, but also a means of grace to get through.
And
go ahead, Kelly.
David?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, like, yes, it brings to mind Isaiah, but it also brings to mind for me, like the scene of Isaiah's call in Isaiah 6.
That's what I'm talking about.
Like, in particular, oh, right. Yeah, you're further down. My bad. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So after he has this,
yeah,
I mean, all of these scriptures in this section, well, Revelation period, but even in 8 through 11, right, there are these images of what goes on in worship and what happens in Isaiah's call. Where's Isaiah? He's within the temple. He's got a live coal that's put to his lips, but where does that coal come from? It comes from the altar of incense, right? Where God's prayers go before God's service. And he takes that and touches his lips, says, woe is me, because I'm a man of unclean lips among a people of unclean lips. What does
woe
that
is
mean?
me, I am undone.
I'm undone. Yeah, I who speaks death into the world, and I'm in the presence of the living God, right? And God heals his speech, heals his waywardness, and then commissions him for service. But in that commissioning, you're not going to be successful in the way that the world thinks about success. And yet this is still good work. So how do we see that in our own day when we're looking around at the things that, as the veil is lifted and we see people's imaginations captive to other powers and blind nature? It's just the way the world is, and you just got to suck it up, but go against that grain. Go get stream, right? But it actually turns it to be the way that life are from the bottom of Ezekiel's throne out, making everything verdant of God to the dry wasteland.
It does have a word for the recent highly shared confession of the why I'm leaving the ministry.
Mm.
I mean, the expectation that everyone is going to hear your words as sweet.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Right, and
Yeah.
successful.
the model of
Right.
pastor as CEO has been the church growth movement for the last 50 years. The mainline church has been in decline since the 60s. A huge voice within that church is, well, let's take on the practices and the ethos of the business world, put on suits and go be successful, and let's get paid those salaries that Kelly was talking about. And when none of that happens, we feel like we're failures in the first place.
And yeah, I think that's good. And I think that is a part of the concern that Kelly raised about empire, right? That we live in the world described by John of Patmos already. And what we're shown, what John is shown, is that so this was in the text I preached on Sunday, that the beast is allowed to conquer the saints. So discipleship is to wage a losing campaign, as David said. And so we're not going to make the world come out right. What we can do is worship the true God. And so, like, I think what, Kelly's concern about empire touches upon what you guys were talking about in terms of the importance of the act of worship, both in Revelation and in like Isaiah and Daniel. That what we can do is be mindful of, are we really worshiping the God of Israel? Or are we giving our fealty to other gods?
And I think that we should take very seriously that the answer to that question is whether or not worship leaves us undone. Right? Like that because so just as an example, and I promise this is related. So let me just do this for a second.
As long are you going to talk about Derrida?
No, I'm going to talk about Hegel.
Okay,
Mighty word.
all right, that's fine.
So the very famous thinker in the Western canon, Hegel, has a super famous passage in this incredibly dense and almost uninterpretable book, The Phenomenology of Spirit. And it's a central passage in Hegel and has become a central passage for thinking about relationality, in like thinking about how we relate to people and power structures and dynamics within society in our time. And it's called the master-slave dialectic.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a moment for Hegel in the sort of progression of spirit through time. But it comes to be interpreted as a way actually to sort of conceive of contemporary relations as master-slave dynamics. Our undoing means that we are undone even from the very concepts we use to navigate the world. And it means that we can't be masters. It means that we will always end up on the side of the slave.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked up this really interesting book recently called Theology for the End of the World. And the central question that is driving this book is by Marika Rose, I think.
Theology for the End of the World. Okay.
Theology for the End of the World. One of the central questions of this book is how would you do theology if you knew you would not win? And I think that this question has to do with what we're talking about here, with our undoing, with undoing the very things that like kind of give us coherence. Like we have to acknowledge that part of what we say when we have the privilege of saying like, oh, I am an American, is like we have an image of what an American is not. And we're like, well, I for sure am not that. I am free. But it requires this image of a person who's not free. This person, right? The freedom is extractive in this way. So our undoing is the undoing even of those kinds of relationships that hold us together, that really knit our identities together. And that's really what I'm trying to say. It's like worship, the transformative power of worship. And let us not be confused about whose power this is. This is God's power acting in worship. It is not our doing. Is meant to leave us undone to that extent, to the point where we can't differentiate ourselves from the slave.
Yeah, and that's a good title, because the word worship can have too narrow of a connotation, right? And so, like, one of the things people should think about in reading Revelation is, so a lot of Christians, in quotation marks, so if you enter into, what am I saying? So God gives us commandments about how to live together as a community, right? So therefore, like, we have to give a shit as people of the Bible about public questions and concerns. So we have to be politically engaged. However, there are a whole lot of Christians on both ends of the political spectrum who enter the public square with the ends justify the means, with effectiveness and winning as the goal, and therefore compromising on the means, i.e. the witness, is acceptable. And so, like, oh, it's okay that, like, we're all kind of like engaging in performative cruelty as long as we get this person on the court, or as long as we get this thing passed, or on the other side, like sure, President Clinton, like, sexually assaulted, someone who was an intern, but because, he can enact the agenda we support, we'll turn a blind eye to that. And so, like, if you enter public engagement realizing that, like, David, all you're really going to get are like little wins, and like,
which always come at the cost of someone else. Like, it's the world is structured in such a way that this is a zero-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, my curiosity goes to, like, it's nice to be able to think on the bigger scheme about, like, Clinton, but I'm thinking about me. So if I buy a Purdue chicken, but I feed my neighbor, like,
yeah.
And this question was posed, like, are we worshiping the one true God? Are we worshiping idols? Like, yes, every day, all day.
Right.
I'm a poor person. I tried to draw the line in the sand. I don't support Amazon, and every once in a while I can't find a book anywhere for my Bible study on a Sunday. So I'm like, hey, in St. Louis, will you please send me through your Amazon book? Does that make me, like, less evil because I'm using Sarah's? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just interesting to me. And that's where I think, my desire is to worship the true God. How do you do that under late stage capitalism? How do I do that knowing that the planet is being destroyed and that, young boys from Guatemala are almost dying? Have a nice dinner. I just don't understand how we exist in a way that worships the Lord. And, Jason, you ended your sermon with, like, so we, communion, like, but is that, my question is always, like, am I doing I'm an Enneagram 1. Am I doing enough? Am I being good? Am I doing good?
But that's, I think, right. That's the thing about Revelation, right? Sorry, Todd, do you want to jump in here?
No, go ahead.
Just that like to kind of turn the phrase again. Yeah, the means justify the ends for a lot of us, but and again, like the us included in that are even we who are attempting to live as the true God has called us to live, right? But who must engage in these betrayals. In right again, discipleship is the art of failure.
Well,
But hold on. I'm sorry. One second. Just the fact that that Revelation is about the end means that there are no means that are justified.
I mean, to connect those two, I think, Kelly, and it's still in the realm of worship, right? It's if it's true that the beast is allowed to conquer the saints, and that the end that David is mentioning is only going to come by the sheer grace of God, then knowing we participate in these dominions that are not of God, part of what it means to worship is to just confess how we're tangled up in all of them,
right?
And to not go hide in a corner of self-justification, right? Which was like a whole lot of people do, myself included.
Yeah, and I think that, and I'm hoping we're still using worship in a very broad context, not Baptist Sunday morning 3 hymns and you're done kind of thing. But what we give ourselves to, and it's really fascinating at the end of chapter 11, where we already have previewed that the beast is given authority to kill the saints. You're going to get that's going to show up again in chapter 13. But at the end of chapter 12, there is just this ever so slight, often missed shift in the chorus of the 24 elders. Mm-hmm. Him who is, who was, and who has taken up your great power and have begun to reign. Mm-hmm. So in all of our losing, undoneness, weakness, failed discipleship, the encouragement to remember that in all of that, God this isn't something we're waiting on. God is reigning in the midst of all of that. And I think that's an explosive thing because it didn't make sense to us. But yet it was Paul who said, the wisdom of God is wiser than the wisdom of men, and the weakness of God is stronger than the strength of men. And
right.
We our calculus is always success, always advancement, always accumulating goods and wealth, etc. And this narrative is one that makes people bitter because they are challenged at those points, and we still have to be living out the reality that God has taken up His power and He's reigning. We're not waiting any longer.
That's good. And Josh, maybe you can talk a little bit about this. So I did this like little discussion group yesterday about Robert Jensen, and that one of Jensen's major themes that he gets from Bart and from just the Bible is that the God of Israel like does stuff in history, in time and space, and I think we make what the point you're making here, like we give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, who is, who was, who is to come, for you have taken your great power. Like that we're living in whatever early stage of God's ultimate reign right now. And it's a profound, we make a profound theological mistake if, for example, we sit in a sanctuary in worship underneath scripture and before a table or a font, and we think about the way the world is and we wonder, like, well, where is God? How come God's not doing anything? When he's literally right here.
Like how many, I mean, the disciples evidently kind of had to figure out something was going on because they all left. God's not here.
A couple of years ago.
Well, this question of where, oh, go ahead.
A couple of years ago, I like to, after I get out of the pulpit on Sunday, take care of a few things, and I try to find time to have a nap, right? A couple of years ago, I was laying on the sofa on a Sunday afternoon, and all of a sudden, I mean, like that, I had a tooth pain, right? I came to find later it was my first ever exposure to having a root canal, but I had a tooth with that already had a small filling in it, and what happened was the root was dying, and when it's corrupted, it off puts gas, and that was trapped underneath my filling, and all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, all I could think about was my back molar on the right side of my face. Pain, suffering.
And all I can think about right now is how I haven't eaten dinner yet.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No, but what I want to say is our experience of pain, of suffering, of looking out at the world sometimes in contempt, sometimes in confusion, is totalizing, right? When my tooth hurt, I wasn't thinking at all about how my elbow works perfectly, right? And I'm in my late 40s, right? And so many other parts of my body are running right now that I have no willpower over, no control. I'm a contingent being, and I exist by the grace of God. God is sustaining me. But there are times when my attention is on so many other things that I'm so wrapped up in it that I can't see anything else. And I think part of this language in Revelation is to shake us up, to say, here I am. Don't forget. It's odd too. It's ironic because sometimes that comes in ways that are less assuming. But as Jason was saying, God is active and at work in the world. God has, as David was saying, you are saved, right? This is a present reality. God rules and reigns. The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord right now. But there are so many times that grab my attention and seize me that prevent me from even having eyes to see that reality in the world. And on top of that, there are other voices who are trying to call my attention away.
That's good.
Yeah, and this question too of like of like pain and the presence of God, like it's, I don't know. I know it's sort of a story that's well run at this point, but the story from Elie Wiesel's memoir, right? Of where is God? He is there, hanging in the gallows. Like it is. This is why I think it's important, right, that we really take seriously the language that occurs in like the Eucharistic liturgy, like the language of sacrifice, the language of death and punishment and judgment and redemption, all of which are located right in this feast in this like almost like grotesque moment, right? This like where we feast on that body that we killed yet still gives us life, right? So we have to sit somewhere in that paradox And like, we're kidding ourselves if we don't think it's a paradox. Like, it's just no way of making sense of it. But like, I think holding that tension, right? Holding that tension of where is God? God is hanging at the gallows, and also is present at the table. Like, Todd, I think someone's at your door.
Is that a doorbell or like a
Chime on the clock.
Mm.
Sorry, a
No,
mantle.
you're good.
Is Alfred going to come into the room and tell you it's time for dinner?
No, we already did that, so we should be good.
Back to the old comment. Did you eat at 5?
About 5:45.
That's all right. It's all right.
Jason's
But also, wait, sorry. Just to get us back to the text, I didn't mean to. Sorry, not to be rude. I really didn't mean to be rude. It just struck me that the question, the whole scene that we're talking about here, right? These chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, all occurs. So the saints getting trampled by the demon, the woes that are unleashed. It all occurs in the same place. It's all before God. Before the altar of the Lord. And so this, like, I think, as difficult as it is to imagine this, right? This the scene, this tension that we're holding of where is God, both at the gallows and at the altar, is happening right here in the scene of Revelation, right? It's all happening before God. I'm not sure where to go with that. It just occurred to me.
Well, I mean, just one thought it raises, right, is that you can come to Scripture with prior assumptions or convictions about what God, right, in abstraction can or cannot do. So you can bring notions of deity to Scripture and then try to make God fit your definition of goodness or love or whatnot. And then you got to make sense of imagery that's not just in Revelation, but it's all over the Old Testament, right? What is, so the 24 elders, Todd, give thanks for God destroying the destroyers of the earth. And so, so I think, the thought that what you're saying, David, raises is that if the true God is a God who reveals himself in history and is active among us and with us in time, how is God not to somehow be caught up in violence? Because violence is the after effect of our sin, right? It's, Adam and Eve, boom, brother killing brother.
It is the condition of our entrance into the world, right? Labor is not a fun time for anyone.
So
it's
so the Song of Miriam refers to God as a man of war, and then the flip side of that is that God takes flesh and comes as Jesus, doesn't take up a sword, but dies by a cross. So either one, if you want a God who is not removed from the world, God is somehow God is caught up in this history of sin that we have made.
Yeah. And God is on the hook for making it turn out okay.
Yeah, and it's why like what you said earlier, David. It's why the end is so important, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're just looking at your everyday life or the present day world as you see it in a newspaper or what have you, the most rational response to that is either nihilism or unbelief. Like, and so like if God doesn't give us this picture of the future, and like give us a down payment of it in word and sacrament, like there's no hope.
Yeah, and so I want to say something, but then I want to ask the group if this is what you're describing, all of you, is true. The question I want to ask is, what is the fruit that's produced in the present? And what I want to offer is, I was preaching on Jacob wrestling the angel at the River Jabbok last Sunday, and part of what I was trying to convey, or led to convey, was that well, it's too much to unpack here, but just that the wrestling is not a surprise to God. God actually encourages wrestling, right? The active engagement, the struggle, that is faith. That is trust, saying, I don't have it all figured out. I'm trying to get back to the promised land. And in the meantime, it seems like all these things are preventing me. And yet God is both giving me an invitation and a blessing in this wrestling.
And there's a famous, oh gosh, I think it's in Oswald Bayer's book. There's a famous artistic illustration of that passage where Jacob is wrestling God. But like the confusion of the wrestling is such that you can't distinguish between God and Jacob and the devil, that it's all kind of this dizzying one confused image. And I think that's like a good way of like depicting our experience of the world. Like what it means to try to be a person of faith.
I do, because I think, again, I'm not going to give you the whole sermon, but part of this is like, I think there's a part
Come on
of
and preach, Josh.
there's a part of Jacob that is plagued by his name. He's the trickster, he's the supplanter, the overthrower. And there are people that he meets that their expectation is that's who you are and you're nothing but that. And so in that scene where he's at the Jabbok, he's leaving Laban, who says, "Why have you deceived me? Right? You stole my idols. You snuck out in the middle of the night." And yet he's trying to go home to Esau, where he can be something different, where he can be Israel. And he always bears both those identities, right? So Jason, where you're talking about being plagued by the devil and wrestled by God, and I'm trying to be a better man and I keep screwing up, but I haven't given up the fight, right? And yet as I struggle, I find out that it's not me that's gaining territory, that's producing the outcome. I find myself, one of the things I said, and Jason, this book, Sam Wells wrote a book about Hauerwas's theology, and it's called Transforming Fate and Destiny. And one of the things I said is fate and destiny are the exact same things from a very different vantage point. Fate is resignation, right? I can't do anything about it. It's just going to happen. Destiny is looking back from the future on your past and saying, how did this place? Both of them lean towards not determinism, but a side of you that's brought you here. But like I said, fate is defeatist, resignation. This is just the way the world is. It's how it has to be. And destiny is like looking back and going, I can't believe God has carried me to this place. And I think that's
really good. Yeah, no, because I think that's really good because like, David's reminded us several times that we can't forget the opening verses of Revelation, but neither can we forget the end, right?
Right.
And it's not this caricatured version of Calvinism where everything is predetermined. If God is truly active in the world, then God has an infinite number of ways to get us to our destiny. So the route isn't like laid out in front of Kelly. She's going to get there one way or the other. Like she could lean towards it and walk towards it, or she can be dragged kicking and pulling, through the love of God to get there. But the
Usually
end is
some
the
mixture of
story.
both.
Yeah, but
I see that
the
nod, Kelly.
but the promise is like this is going to happen. And so like day to day, like what do you like? Choose this day whom you will serve. Like,
and know that like that grace is such that given that you will fail either way, God's still going to get you there.
yeah. Yeah. But Josh, I think and maybe we can wrap up with this, but the character of Jacob is a good one, right? Because one of the guiding convictions of apocalyptic literature is that there's a multiplicity of gods that we could choose to serve. And I think because we all exist at the tail end of Christendom, where Christianity's God was kind of established, and so we kind of take God for granted, and we don't really take seriously that there are other gods. But there are other gods, and so who is our loyalty and fealty given to? And right, Josh, sometimes it's like, well, like maybe this is God that Kelly's wrestling with. Maybe she's spending a whole lot of energy, or Todd's like wasting a whole lot of time being frustrated by something he thinks is God, but actually like, no, he's gotten himself involved in a whole other thing that like has nothing to do with the God of the Bible. And I think that's where a lot of us live often. So Adam says in chapters 8 and 9, we see angels seeming to cause much of the death and destruction, verses 14 and 15 in particular. Does the word angel necessarily mean that these angels are agents of God, or could they be aligned with principalities and powers and permitted to act for a time?
Well, I mean, the short answer to that is to recall that Satan is an angel.
So it's So I mean, it just means messenger, right? Because chapter 13 does refer to, the devil's angels.
But think about Exodus too, right? Exodus as well, not Exodus chapter 2. But the angel of death, right? That God either unleashes or kind of lets loose in some way to take the firstborn offspring, right? There's another instance, right, where it's like, I don't know, is this God or is this like some demon that God let off the hook for a little bit? Like,
I mean, that is, I was thinking about this on like recently, like I can't remember where it is in Luther, but like, Luther like insists, well, the only devil there is God's devil. Like however far back you want to string that string of causality, like you're not getting Yahweh off the hook.
Yeah.
Well, gang.
Joni has one more question for us. How can we know that we are worshiping the real God?
That's a very good question. Kelly.
I just told you that's what I'm wrestling with on the daily.
That's why I asked you. And
Um,
you're sideways on my screen, so you're kind of like beside Adventure Kelly.
I didn't know. It says when I sign in to do it landscape, and then I'm like, I plugged my phone in. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
You're fine.
Like you guys are all on with the LSD.
But
so
I called on you because you caught my attention because you're drowning.
Yeah, I don't know. How do you know? How do you know? You know, it's interesting. I love that you asked me, but I don't want to answer it. I am, part of substitute. Where I'm substituting, there's a lot of Muslim students in the school, and I got to spend a lot of time today talking with one, and he was really interesting. He was really open to talking to me. He's like, our Bible has never been translated. Like the Quran is in the same, and he goes, that's how I know mine's true. And I was like, huh. And I thought, it's really good. I can't say anything right now because I have nothing to say. You're right. I'm sitting here in front of the Message Bible, and we've got the King James version, and so yeah, I don't know. I want to hear from Todd.
Oh, I like this. Can we pass this one around and then we'll end? All right, good. Yes.
How about, may I offer to close us with prayer? Prayer not my own, but it's Thomas Merton's, and maybe you all heard this, but maybe it'd be helpful to Joni.
Well, before we give answers, you're just gonna pray?
I think is, or how about I just read
Okay.
it?
Well,
Okay.
hold on. Let's pass this around, and then Josh will be last. Josh will be last, and he can press out.
Let's let Josh pray, and then because we've gone over an hour. So.
We're letting Todd off the hook.
You guys, somebody in the chat is begging with a lot of ease that we answer this question first, and then maybe we can close.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, Joni and Kelly.
Well, it's Todd's turn, Jason.
Jason's go right ahead. I'll follow up.
I was. How do we know that we're worshiping the real God? I think. Are we thinking about our own lived witness in conversation with the communion of saints? So does the way that we exemplify the gospel correspond to lives that the church has verified through the witness of the saints? Are you? I think it was Luke Norsworthy who tweeted out a couple years ago about how he's known a lot of people who've left their church over politics, but haven't left their political party because it doesn't correspond to their church or their Christianity. Where are we investing our deepest? Do you know the starting lineup of the Washington Commanders better than the books of the Bible? Where is our time and energy and heart spent? And then to Kelly's example, the great thing about Muslims is they're under no illusions that they're in contention with rival religions in the world. So I think part of an answer to Joni's question is Christians need to be serious about catechesis again. That we live in a culture that more nearly resembles the paganism of ancient Rome, and so we need to be trained to give an account of the hope that is within us, and not in an American evangelical apologetics kind of way, but the true God of Israel has made himself known in these particular ways, and this is how we know that it's true. Now, Todd.
How do we know? I think it's a question that could be parsed. I think the real issue is I'd put what you said, just not to say it better, but I would say it different, that if what we're worshiping one both looks like Jesus and is working a transformative work in us to be like Jesus, then we're probably worshiping the real God. So that as we've talked already tonight, if the test cases are, I'm trying to be successful, gain notoriety, be well known at the expense of whomever I can trample underfoot, you're probably worshiping a different God. And so I would add one thing. Meister Eckhart is alleged to have said, "God rid me of God." And so I think that's an ongoing thing for us, because if we have any ideas about God that don't correspond to Jesus, then we've probably manufactured a deity in our image. And so I think it's an always ongoing question, who have I made God to be? And when I find myself doing things contrary, I probably need to revisit the one I've determined to be the real God. And
That's
it
good.
always ought to look like the lamb, the slain lamb.
And that corresponds to like the 10 Commandments then too, right? Because like the commandments are like, like we need to keep God's name holy, right? Like not call him by other names. But like the way that you're not calling him by other names is like, oh, also like, are you like at least like valuing the rule that we shouldn't covet and we shouldn't lie, and that like
Right.
even if we break them, like are we excusing them or like are we confessing them?
Right. Yeah.
I would add also it's interesting with the commandment on God's name, that actually the result of that is calling God by another name. Like we don't speak it. We use a substitute. And but I mean we, in terms of like, you don't say the Tetragrammaton. You say Adonai. You say Lord. Right. So there's other it's just interesting. I don't know, like that kind of yeah, I'm not sure where to go with that. Just okay. Now I'm gonna answer the question. That was just an observation before. I think it's interesting to ask like, okay, what do we mean by know? How do we know? Is this know a certainty beyond any kind of question? Is this know in the realm of kind of objective fact? Is this know scientifically provable by the scientific method? All of which I would say no.
So David, that makes me
to
think of
have
like,
room for faith. What?
can you hear me?
Sorry, yes, just say it.
I'm sorry, I'm getting phone calls. I should have done do not disturb. If we hope in what we see, then it's not hope, right? And Miroslav Volf did a podcast during COVID that really, I was not okay in the beginning during COVID, and he talked about hope and how hope needs to be born of desperation. And so, I think my answer for that is that I can't know until this end, right? I can't. And I wish I had faith like other people do. I don't, and I know we haven't shared our stories, but I met Jesus when I was 30. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't have any idea what Noah's Ark was about or Moses, and so that was 14 years ago now. And still every day, right? Like it's a, when we talk about Jacob, I get teary eyed because I'm wrestling, but I'm not leaving here because this was your idea, pal. I was an atheist. I was a hardcore atheist and I hated Christians. And so I think God has a wonderful or terrible sense of humor, but for me, I can't know. And so that's what faith is. That's like, for me, it's the very definition of faith. That's why I'm not interested in getting a conversation, even if I was allowed to today with this Muslim student. I'm just so honored that he's sharing with me about his faith and how he's going to go, do his prayer journey. And he's so excited about it. And I'm just humbled to be standing there before a teenager boy that's choosing to, I've never met him before today, and he's choosing to let me into his life. I think maybe that's more of a, me showing the character of Jesus is just being present in this kid's life and listening to what's important to him. I don't need to argue or do apologetics, but hopefully by my example, he'll know Christ. And so that's the best I got, is that I'll know at the end. But in the meantime, I'm just wrestling along with hopefully the rest of us. And the scariest people to me are the ones that know.
That's
Those are the people I
right.
want
Exactly.
nothing to
That's
do with.
exactly where I was going to go. Is like that's the beautiful thing about that story, right? Is like, or one of the beautiful things about that story, I should say. First of all, find me a teenage Christian boy in America who's excited about prayer. I don't know. I'm sure one exists, but hard to come by. But the other thing, right, is like the one who is certain, the one who knows with this absolution is the one who is more prone to get in that kid's face, to deny him the humanity that that journeying with Christ and Christ journeying with us requires us to acknowledge.
But I think that's right. But I think to Joni's question, it's not that the scriptures do not they do not expect us to engage other people with certainty.
Right.
But what I most often experience, Kelly, because we swim in different waters, is like, we're basically all the same, you know. And I really valued, right, working with a Muslim chaplain who referred to me as an infidel, and with a Catholic nun who was like constantly trying to get me to like join the one true church, you know. And so I think, you know, to engage one another with a seriousness, you know, like, well, no, like there's actually something at stake in these questions, and to do so with humility. I think that's
absolutely
because to make everybody the same is just a move of power and privilege, which is why it's usually white people that look like me doing it.
All right, Josh, close us out.
Oh, so I commend to you over going conversation between Stephen Colbert and Phoebe Waller-Bridges from Fleabag fame, and if you hate it, but little fox that appears in weird places and it's never explained, and Stephen Colbert asks Phoebe about it. What does it mean? And she says, what do you think it means? And he says, is it the hound of heaven? And I'll just leave it. Here is for Joni. Here's a prayer from Thomas Merton. Let it. My Lord God, I have where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I'm doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust in you always, though I may seem to be lost. Death, I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. In the name of the living God, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah, that was good.
Well, it was good to talk with you guys. I'm gonna go throw a Purdue chicken in the oven, and I'm really not. I'm really not.
No,
I'm really not.
no, he won't. He won't do
Tupperware
that.
and take it over to Kelly.
Jason, I know you shop organic.
I don't do that either, but
yeah. No, Josh, thanks. I love Thomas Merton. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's after 1994, Todd. When I did become a Christian, I had a couple C.S. Lewis books, Kelly, and an Aquinas book, all of which Dennis Perry gave me. and then I went to like Barnes and Noble looking for other like Christian books, and like, you know, as is like it is true today in most Barnes and Nobles, most of what was there was like a St. Augustine book and then a whole lot of shit. But I did that was like right around, Josh, when the Thomas Merton's letters were published, like 3 or 4 volumes, and so I read all those. And those were good. I don't know that they were that formative, but they were interesting.
He has a little book of essays called Faith and Violence. That's
Mhm.
really good.
I kind of
really
don't
good.
like Merton.
That's fine. You don't have
Because-
to. Like,
I got some hangups about Merton as a female, but
Because
we just talk about it when we're not
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of think I know what you're going to say, so it's all right.
And honestly, that book that I have, Jason, I asked you about somebody the other day, and I'm like trying to read this book, and I can't. Like, I can't. I've tried like 4 times since, and I'm so disappointed by it because I really wanted to read that book, but